All right, we are live and ready to go. Let's see, turn down some volume here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live with Pamela J. Green. We have a fantastic lineup today for you, and I'm learning something new from these wonderful individuals, and that is how to do live and a PowerPoint all at the same time. So I want to welcome my guest, Meryl Botello from Burnham Benefits, and Dr. Santor Nishizaki, who is going to be here and talk to us about the impact on a multi-generational workforce. And not just that, it's really the headlines that's impacting all of us. I'm just so excited. We'll probably go all the way up to an hour. I will give you information to reach out to them beyond this because they've got a lot to say. So I want to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Nishizaki, and you get us going here.
All right, thanks, Pam and Meryl, and thank you everybody else for showing up. We appreciate it. So this is going to be more conversational. This is us, of course. Contact info at the end. So the overview of the presentation is we're going to talk about the different generations in the workplace. I know that most of you probably have seen this before, but it's always good to get a refresher. And then we're going to talk about the impact of COVID, and then I'm going to have a conclusion and a Q&A, but we're going to have different discussion questions. So please feel free to post something in the chat or any type of comments. And we're going to have discussions here as well with us three. So the first discussion question is, and Pam and Meryl, do generational differences have an impact on productivity in the workplace, and how?
Meryl, you take it away. What do you think?
No, absolutely. More and more now than ever, we do have to get to know our employees, life at home. Who's living in their home? Do they have kids? The school schedule? And as of before, you kind of just want to keep that separate. So as far as the generational differences, the studies and the stats that we're going to present today, it's kind of going to direct the conversation that we're going, but definitely. Anyone out there would like to, enter some feedback, please go into the chat, and Pamela will be monitoring that, so we make sure we address any comments and questions.
Yeah, because I know we got a lot of questions out there on this whole generational stuff, and I'm wondering how many folks even care. Are you even seeing generational differences show up, and in what ways? How are you seeing some of the generational differences showing up? This going from being mostly in person to being remote, kind of forced remote, is bringing out a lot of different things in us. So I'm just excited to talk a little bit more about it. Go ahead there, Santor.
Great. All right. And I think it's really important to talk about what a generation is, because a lot of people say, oh, I think I'm a baby boomer or a Gen XY or whatever, right? That's not a generation, but it's pretty much growing up from youth to adulthood, the passage and that journey of growing up from youth to adulthood. And typically they say it's around 20 to 21 years. I think, and I said this, we had a great conversation during a PIRA Riverside meeting last week and the presentation. And I think technology has really accelerated that 20 to 21 years into smaller micro generations. And we'll talk about the different other generations in a bit, but a lot of people try to use this to their advantage, right? Which is, are you a millennial? A lot of millennials will say no, they're a shennial, which is a new term with where you have Gen X / millennials, a hybrid, so they don't want to say they're millennial, they could say they're that. Meryl, that's you, right?
I've been told.
So we're going to go over that in just a second. Of course, we have to have a disclaimer here, right, Pam?
Yes, please.
We don't want to stereotype, because you have people that are different generations, and that doesn't mean that defines them, right? We're all individuals, and we're all wired differently. And then, of course, we're going to talk about mental health. And if you need help, please talk to a trained mental health professional, or reach out to Meryl, right? You have plenty of resources from Burnham.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, great. So these are the current generations in the workplace. So I think, Pam, you said you wanted to talk about, we could self-identify here. Is that allowed, right?
Yeah, let's self-identify. Well, I will tell you, when we were talking about this and getting ready, I think as I get older, I actually get younger because I'm really on the cusp of being in that. Well, I was in the Gen X up until this year. And so I'm like, I feel like I'm a Gen X person at heart, maybe a millennial, but a baby boomer by this definition. And I'm going to stay that way. I'm not moving, although I might move downward. But I would say I'm solid somewhere between a Gen X and a baby boomer, to be honest.
Great. What about you, Meryl?
I am a Gen X millennial as well, and just the more and more I talk to you and these studies, I do relate to both, and finding the positives in both too. So it's not
Yeah.
just the negative stuff, but let's keep it real. Like there are some notes that we're going to talk about that that need to be addressed and how we could all work together. And I think I'm a very empathetic person, so I could relate to every generation. And it's just the key is to listen and to be very empathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like my last slide in this deck. So perfect. You can skip that one. Yeah, and I'm a millennial, a little bit of an older millennial, or I guess you'd say middle of the range. And I just a little background. I wrote my dissertation on millennial work environment preferences because that's what everyone's trying to figure out. But now we have Gen Z, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But what some of the benefits, though, really is you bring a broader range of skills and perspectives. When you
Yes.
have all the right. I mean, I'm sure you two have a lot of stories on, collaborating with your colleagues. I know for me, when I worked at companies, someone has done my job before. So I would say, hey, how did you do this back on this project 30 years ago? And a lot of it's still relevant. Maybe some things have changed slightly, the tools, but I've always reached out to more senior folks to give me advice.
Well, what do you think about that? I mean, so I know when I'm doing keynotes and trainings, it seems like we've historically been bashing the millennials. I mean, it's just, I mean, people just go full on bashing these wonderful, lovely people. But it feels like maybe we might not be doing that anymore. It's like equal opportunity bashing because we have, like you said to us the other day, we have more people in the workforce today than that these generations than we've had in the past. So it's amazing to see what is evolving out of all of this.
Well, and millennials are the most people they're the highest, the most amount of people in the workforce today. They surpass boomers. But yeah, I think, and a lot of times people think anyone under 40 is a millennial. Oh, you're millennial, right? And you can't say there's certain things you can't say to older people in the workplace, right? Okay, boomer is not an acceptable thing to say in the workplace. And then Meryl, what do you think?
Well, I'm gonna talk a little bit on the personal life. I have older stepkids too, and so I see the stats and the patterns, and I'm trying to tweak it a little bit, like educate them more. And as well as college students, I've just been taking more of the role to be a mentor and to help them out. So any of these nuances to be addressed, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm really coming from a mentorship program because I don't know. A lot of my generation, we're all hustlers from what I see, all my friends and family. So we just need to mentor, I think, especially on the virtual side when you have social media and that's what you see. But there's so many layers to it. So you have to get to know each individual person and
Yeah.
listen.
Yeah.
So I'm trying. I really am.
Well, at
Well,
some point, I want us to answer the question, why should senior leaders care about this stuff? Because, I'm dealing with a lot of individuals in the C-suite and having been there myself, I sometimes it gets lost, and you're right. We will categorize everyone as one thing, and that's unfair. It's not the right thing to do, but why should we care and how? So I'd be interested in knowing your thoughts as we go throughout the presentation.
yeah, if you look at my second bullet point, it leads to greater innovation, right? You could have, you talk to the people that are doing the work down at the front lines, they're going to know what your customer wants. You want to hear their opinion. That's inclusion, right? Is bringing them to the table. And that's really important. Different points in my career, I've been, talking to the people doing the work. They're the ones, they have so many great ideas. And a lot of things get lost between the C-suite, middle level management, and entry level folks.
Yep.
So if you want to become more innovative, I think that's a good thing to do. So these are just some baby boomer statistics, an overview. They were defined as going through the civil rights movement, Vietnam War. They are sometimes described as rebels, right? Natural born rebels. I like telling, when I do the keynotes on this, Forrest Gump is like the ode to baby boomer movie.
Yes.
My parents are baby boomers. They love that movie. Like, oh my gosh, I remember when this happened, and this happened, and this happened.
Yeah.
So is that, Pam, what do you think about that?
I totally agree. I mean, I think honestly, baby boomers were getting the stuff done, and moving hard political decisions forward. And I think that gave our children maybe a feeling that they could just take a little relaxation pip. I don't know. I mean, I really feel like that banner had not been passed on until recently. I'm starting to see, but I'm really seeing it sort of skip a generation, because I've been to a couple of protests, and I've seen younger people, the children of my children, out there. So it's very interesting to see how things are maybe skipping generations in terms of passion from baby boomers into other to generation. So Gen Z, Gen X kinds of generations. I'm probably screwing it all up, but yeah, I definitely would say that you characterized it accurately, captured it.
And what about you, Meryl?
Um,
On baby boomers, Forrest Gump.
All I could say is, like, I do love working with baby boomers too, and I'm so happy, with technology that comes into play. And I feel a little more bad, because I'm like, okay, well, a lot of us were raised with technology, but I think a lot of them are really up to par, if not better than us sometimes, on using technology as a baby boomer.
Yeah.
And adapting more.
Yeah.
I agree. They actually are highly competitive. They had to be, right? So I think explaining technology, like the benefit to them, I think is always useful, because we all get busy, and I think you show them ROI. Hey, if you learn this new software, it's going to free up an hour of your day. Oh, okay. Well, then I'll learn it, right?
And what's the end game for me? Yeah. And then I might do it. But yeah.
And don't say this is so easy, right? When
that's a cuss word to a baby boomer.
Well, my parents, they're on like Facebook more often and on social media more than I am.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you now, if Facebook changes, you're gonna lose a lot of baby boomers, because my mother is in Facebook. And if you they shift anything in Facebook, it's all over, because that's where baby boomers are living. So yeah, enough on that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And another really interesting stat about baby boomers is that 10,000 are retiring every day. That's a Pew Research stat, which is a lot of knowledge that's going out the door.
Yeah.
So I think as you're talking to all these C-suite executives and just anybody who's listening, right, is what type of knowledge transfer programs are you having?
Yeah.
And I have a ton of baby boomer mentors, and they love passing knowledge on. So it's having formal and informal mentoring programs are so important.
Yeah. And I would even add to that, how do we leverage platforms like Facebook, for example, to help them share the knowledge? If they're accustomed to a platform like this, then it to me begs to reason organizations, senior leaders need to pay attention to how do we give them the same kind of environment to share that, to stay connected to us as an organization, and to share that knowledge. And I think, having worked in HR, one of the biggest challenges that organizations have oversight is that they don't stay connected to former employees, especially those who are huge champions of the organization. So it's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's what Yammer tried to do, right?
Right.
Which is like kind of copy Facebook's model.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it just seemed very similar.
I think it did. but didn't succeed.
Yeah, I think a lot sorry, go ahead, Mel.
I was just referring to the chat. We have Helen saying, I think industries impact the learning or awareness of generational differences. And it's interesting that you brought that up because we brought that up the other day, right, Santor? Said, which industry still has the majority of the baby boomers? And this is not a technical stat, but it's the government or something like that. And technology obviously has a lot of the younger, but that does have a big
Yeah. Great
Oh,
topic.
I also see the chat as well. Some baby boomers are feeling unconnected. So I think as leaders, it's our job, right, to reach out to the people that you work with. And I have some other stats actually, Jennifer, later today, talking about how since COVID happened, how the different generations are reacting to being disconnected to the organization. So I think yeah, having a mentoring program is a formal one is a really good start. And having a lot more social. I think Merrill was telling me they do a lot of cool happy hours and fun things like that at Burnham, which is good things like that to stay connected, at least during COVID.
Oh yeah, that has been one of my. It's not my primary job, but just keeping everybody connected and utilizing like local businesses, small businesses, coffee companies other than Starbucks. I even have like a plant succulent class going on. I have cooking classes. Which I want to make sure I'm adhering to all generations. And it seems like people need this connection because it's not just, liking a picture or anything like that. It's actually looking at people's faces and interacting.
Yeah, showing your face on the Zoom screen, right?
Absolutely. And being, well, we have to be careful of that because see, baby boomers demand, we need to see your face. And what we found is that with younger generations and other generations, that people don't necessarily want you to see what's happening culturally within their home. You don't need to see how I live, whether I'm in a nice home or not, or I don't want you to make a judgment about me based on where I live. And so that's creating a little bit of conflict, right?
Yeah, we were talking about that last week or yesterday or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but having Zoom backgrounds are a good idea.
Yeah.
So maybe having I think I heard yeah, someone said like when you have meetings, everyone pick a fun Zoom background or something to mix it up.
Yeah.
So that could be another option.
And creative ways to meet. I found out, I don't know, maybe it was one of you guys. Somebody told me you can rent out movie theaters for a relatively inexpensive price. And, you could have your teams meet in person, but spread out in a large movie theater. So we still kind of get that sense of being in person that a lot of us want and need. You help the economy, you teach people how to safely social distance, and you allow them, which I think is really a baby boomer thing, to congregate in some kind of way, to have that face-to-face connection. So, or any outdoor kind of thing. I think we got to get really, really creative while we're still trying to safely distance ourselves, especially during the time that we live in now.
Yeah. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. One second. I got another chat as well.
Yeah, and we want to note while you're doing that, you had said, Santor, that baby boomers, there's not so much data compared to millennials. So this conversation always focuses on millennials, but that's why we're, wanting to really address this. So if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to take it away on the baby boomers.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just waiting for that, but I think we could go back to that. But yeah, baby boomers actually prefer to have conversations face to face. That is the most preferred method, face to face and emails. So it's kind of interesting, being that we can't have face to face in person anymore. We can virtually, but it's not the same thing, right? Yeah, and it's hard. So yeah, communicating with baby boomers face to face is kind of the best way to go. And Pam, feel free to chime in on this one, and Meryl as well. Do you think that sometimes baby boomers see that if you're at your desk, you're considered working? or if you're online, you're considered working, and if you're not at your desk, you're not considered working. I've
You
seen
know,
that. Yeah.
I think it's the older generation as well. I think that the baby
Great
boomer,
generation, right?
yeah, I think that there's something about seeing you that we've historically tied to productivity. If you look like you're doing something, therefore you must be. And what we found as a result of people being dispersed and having to work remotely is that we really didn't have a good way to measure productivity and effectiveness. We just were checking some boxes and giving people, I think, some leeway because we saw them. Well, they had to have been working. So I'm going to give them an excuse for why they didn't get this into me or why something didn't happen. And then we were way more connected. So we were way more forgiving because we knew more about your personal life. So I think that to really kind of answer your question, I think that it's been a real challenge to work remotely because we can't see you. We don't know what you're doing. And so it's forced us to rethink things.
And I guess I'd like to add just one other thing. I think we've moved from like a production mentality, right, to service mentality. Some of us have, but some of the other people are thinking that production mentality. You're at your desk, like an assembly line for 8 hours, and you're considered working.
Yeah.
And what I've been saying before COVID to when I would do keynotes to clients is you really need to focus on what you just said, Pam, which is being results driven and task driven rather than time driven.
Yep.
Because I don't know about you all. I mean, I'm able to get done so much in like 4 to 6 hours if I'm uninterrupted than I could do like in a whole week working in an office.
Amazing how much work you can get done. And I've always said that, having worked remotely, that I was way more productive. The biggest challenge, though, is turning it off and figuring out a way to just, divorce myself from technology and the work and just take some deep breaths. I think
Balance.
yeah, we need it.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I do want to tie it in with COVID and how these headlines are affecting baby boomers. So, from a benefits level, from health level, we also need to be sensitive to underlying conditions. And if you're forcing them to go to the office when they do have an underlying condition, that's also a sensitive point and how it's different now. Just making sure that everybody's healthy. If they're not, if they do have underlying conditions, do tell them, what, we'll accommodate, make sure you're in a safe place and environment.
Yeah. And not only that, what about childcare?
Yeah.
Right. I think we have some stuff, some other slides on that too, for sure. So I just want to keep going because we have some really great discussion topics coming up. Gen X, I just wanted to talk about those folks because I hope, I don't know if there's any on there, but there's an article I read that Gen X is made for the COVID pandemic because they're the latchkey kids, right? The ones that grew up with both working parents and they had the key and they were seen as being very independent when they were growing up. So there's an interesting article I read about that. And they actually are seen as being autonomous, questioning of authority, first generation to grow up with computers and video games. And then they actually are seen they were actually considered to job hop about the same amount or slightly a little bit more than millennials did in their 20s, if you compare the age ranges. And they're the ones that really fought for work-life balance. So all the millennials who are on here, we can say thank you to Gen X because they were the ones really pushing for it before we came into the work.
And I think that's been mistakenly assigned to millennials. And people don't think about work-life balance being a Gen X kind of thing. And because I kind of, teeter between both, having been a latchkey kid and, grew up having a Sega Genesis and, all of these different things. And the microwave was a thing, when it first came into, just remembering some of those things. It's amazing how we forget and we assign to other generations, but you're absolutely right. It's good stuff.
Another interesting stat I like talking about is Gen Xers actually spend more time on social media than millennials do.
Oh,
according to a Nielsen report. Yeah, they spend 6 hours and 58 minutes per week compared to millennials 6 hours and 19 minutes. Because you always think millennials are on social media, but they're on social media quite a bit, which I thought was an interesting statistic. So, and I have some more stats on Gen Xers a little bit later on how they have some challenges. Anything, Meryl, you want to add to this Gen X slide?
Love them. I do want to point out that Gen X stat that self-report to be more patriotic than millennials. Let's see how that is this year. Playing field, very opinionate opinions out there, so that'll be something to monitor.
Sorry, go ahead.
But as far as post-COVID, I feel like a lot of these return to work and all these policies, it's a lot of them being generated by this generation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, 51% of global leaders are Gen Xers.
wow.
Yeah, that's another stat that's really interesting. And they're one of the only ones to recover their wealth from the Great Recession.
Wow.
So Gen X, I think they don't get enough airtime, right?
I don't think so.
Because they're
I
not
think
the
we
most
forgot about
verbal.
it.
Yeah, but they're a great generation, and they're the ones that are, they call them the sandwich generation as well. But they're the ones that are essentially, at the point of running corporate America right now. So they're waiting for a lot of baby boomers to retire. They've been waiting quite a long time.
Well, you know what they can do now is kind of just a little shove and a push to move us out of the workforce. But two, aren't a lot of the baby boomers also becoming entrepreneurs? So if they leave the workforce, they're not just retiring, they're starting small businesses and really driving some of that, I'm wondering.
They're actually twice as likely as millennials to start a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with all that experience, and money, because they actually have the disposable income, even though
Don't tell nobody that. Right.
And another thing is they communicate. They're kind of hands-off type of managers. So usually, you're doing good if you don't hear too many complaints. They do actually prefer to be mentors. Learn about their pop culture. So Nirvana, the grunge period, right? I don't know if that's familiar to Lisa or any of the other Gen Xers on the chat box.
Right.
And then allow flexibility for them, right? Give them, and in a COVID world, this is actually relatively, it's working to their favor of being able to have more flexibility. I mean, obviously, Gen Xers have it pretty much more, I'd say, very tough because they have parents and kids to take care of. That's another thing I was reading about, which I thought was interesting. I don't know. Is anybody, you all want to comment on that?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of went through that kind of toward the end. My son is 18. He graduated this year. So he's one of the class of 2020. But I had support system at home. My husband's, was always very, very supportive. So we had to work together because my mom moved in with us. And so, her health care, my son, getting him off to school, me working and traveling, my husband working, it was rough. And especially when we relocated from the Midwest to the East Coast and we lost that support system. It was really very challenging. So I empathize with a lot of folks who are struggling right now to just show up for work by pushing a button and turning on a screen, because you got to care for your kids, not just care for them. You got to educate them, take care of your loved ones, and you're expected to be productive at work. It's a very challenging time for those folks.
And that's great to point out, because that's where I relate to most, because my daughter, who's going to be 7, and then my parents are very, scared of this, honestly. And they were helping me take care of my daughter too. So now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay,
switch.
I can handle both and be respectful to both sides, but still get my job done and be productive. So for this generation, this is where I relate to the most. It's just being the caretaker and having a caretaker.
Fantastic.
Are we ready for millennials?
Let's give them. Let's right. Any millennials out there, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, please. So millennials are seen as the trophy generation. They're seen as being optimistic, tech-savvy, innovative, close to the parents. Now, these are some interesting stats right here. 59% of millennials describe the members of their own generation as self-absorbed. 49% say they're wasteful, and 43% describe themselves as greedy. So it's interesting. Millennials dislike their own generation more than any others, which I thought was pretty funny. But
Yeah.
that's not always the case, right? I think
No.
you hear this a lot, but you say, "Oh, those millennials." Is like, well, you're a millennial too. But I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of millennial bashing, and probably before millennials, there's Gen X bashing, right?
Yeah. And I also notice when that happens, if I'm doing a keynote or I'm doing a training or workshop, if someone starts to bash millennial and I know that there are millennials in the room, they do not get like publicly offended. I have never had a millennial, get up and just be, getting into it with someone or just, debating back and forth. I mean, they have just been, at least in my sessions, they have been very gracious in handling all of this bashing. So much to learn from them because they handle it well. And then they chime in and say, yeah, there's some things I would agree with. However, it's been interesting to watch that.
Yeah, that's funny. Mara, what do you think?
I'm going to go back to mentoring the millennials, how important it is. The thing is, the part I relate to as being a millennial is that I care so much about, what's going on in the world with my clients. I mean, just I've never cared so much as much as I have now. And that's the good part about being a millennial, being very passion driven, being effective and making sure you make a difference in life. And to what degree, everyone has their own definition, but I'm going through that right now. And then I just talk to a lot of people and they care a lot more now than ever about what the impact is of COVID, anything in the news.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a magic word, right? Is impact. I think millennials, they love making an impact, and I say if you lead them, and anybody really, I mean, we all love making an impact, but that's kind of one of the things that we grew up with, right? Is making a difference. And I think as leaders, if you could communicate to them how they contribute in their role to the impact of the whole organization, I think you'll see tremendous employee engagement. Which is what I usually talk about. So millennials, they really like diversity and inclusion. They value that, and Gen Z as well. And actually, some millennials are starting to do digital detoxes.
Oh,
now you can't do Zoom digital detoxes if that's your job, but has anybody heard of a social media detox?
I've not heard it phrased in that way, but that's kind of cutting yourself off from social media that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I've been hearing that a lot, and I've been practicing it actually, which is tough to do as an entrepreneur. But you hire somebody to take care of that stuff, so you don't have to be in it all the time. Because I think it actually some research that it's leading to increased depression among all generations. You just gotta turn it off. But I worry about the younger generation that has it on so much.
And some of the older millennials, they grew up pre-social media impacting their lives, right? So they got to see, they got their foot in both sides. So they got to see the impact, and they are doing digital detoxes. And part of it is, I mean, as a society, right? When you had gatherings at your home or anywhere else, or you go out to dinner with your friends, how many of you actually have people put away their phones? Does anybody have a box and say, hey, can everybody put their smartphones in here? This is pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID. Well, Meryl, you start. What have you been experiencing?
Well, in my house, there's teenagers, a little kid, myself, and and we try to do it at dinner. Pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, definitely a lot more enforcing it, because if my child sees me not put my phone down and I just asked her to, I mean, it just does that I need to check myself. And a lot of it is work. So I try to say, hey, I'm working here, like let me be. But then at the same time, you need to let go of that. If it's 7:30 in the afternoon, in the evening, turn off my phone.
And the Apple Watch, right?
Yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Take off the Apple Watch, the phone. It goes on the island while we have dinner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're doing it.
Cool. So another thing about millennials, right? They can be, they're very team oriented, but can be seen as highly competitive. We had all this competitive sports and everything else growing up. They prefer to communicate, over communicate with them. IMs, text, Slack, face to face, Zoom, right? Just over communicate. That's what they like. And I'll show you some stats a little bit later in the presentation on they don't feel like they're getting communicated well enough from their companies on what's going on. Them and Gen Z, yeah. And baby boomers feel they feel fine. And Gen Xers too. So I think if any of you all are leaders within your organizations out there, you should definitely start over communicating, doing daily. I think Meryl, we talked about this, and Pam, I think yesterday, right?
Yep.
Having daily briefings, just standing meetings, right? Just 5 minutes. That's all you need, and then having weekly all hands instead of quarterly. They don't need to be long, just maybe 20 to 30 minutes.
I think we've got to have shorter, more frequent meetings. You're right. I mean, we have to dispense with these hour-long meetings. And I would even say, and there are going to be a lot of trainers and consultants out there who get upset with me about this, but I'm like, I get asked to do a lot of 2-hour trainings because, we're so used to day-long trainings. And I'm like, can we break this up a little bit? Can we do like 30 minutes and a break, another 30 minutes and let people take a break or something like that? I mean, there's a lot of content, or spread it out over the week or the month. But same thing with team meetings. Do they have to be an hour? Can they just be 15 minutes max?
Have an agenda, show up on time, right? I mean, you could use your Zoom to kick people out, right?
Yeah.
People come in 5-10 minutes late, and then we have to reverse. And I think having an agenda and action items, that's just me saying professionalism, and I think sometimes that gets lost, right? Especially.
And I want to add something to that, because I'm working with a client now who we have an employee who was kicking people out of the Zoom meetings, and someone submitted a complaint that he was creating a hostile work environment. Woohoo! What generation was that? So, and we had to do an investigation, and come to find out that it was very hostile, the way that he was doing it. It wasn't in, I think, cutting people off and keeping them from coming in the meeting, or people who were disruptive, kicking them out of a meeting. I mean, it's just interesting to see how some of these behaviors are evolving in the workplace. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point, Pam. And I think, having this, it's just like with regular meetings, right? You need to have some type of guidelines, or we need some ground rules, some etiquette, right? You show up to meetings on time. If you're not there within 5 to 10 minutes, then you're gonna have to make the next one. I mean, but you can't just boot people out of meeting. That's just my own personal opinion, right? I could see that being seen as being bullied or something like that.
Yeah. And Jennifer is right. They're not even having 2-hour meetings. They're trying to avoid that as much as possible.
I think one of the biggest things, Pam, and I think, what I've been doing with my clients is making it interactive. And being a professor too, right? You can't just lecture you can't do a training for 2 hours and without having some type of activities, which is also making sure that you're very proficient on the software that you all are using. And that's what I was telling Meryl, is like, I've been using Zoom before it was cool, since I've been teaching online for a couple of years. So making sure it's interactive, and as humans, you need to have breaks. Yeah. Especially as adults.
So at Burnham, I do a lot of set up the training, so we're up to date with the carriers and vendors. And I just tell them up front, our attention span 10 minutes, and have your personality out, get to know the people, know your audience. So I would say it's as short as 10 minutes. And I think one of your stats will say what the attention span for a certain generation is. It like 9 seconds or something?
9 seconds for Gen Z, which is less than a goldfish.
Okay.
Yep. And you notice too, because I was watching a YouTube video with my son. I think it was about sharks or something the other day, and they had a commercial, and it was like 5 seconds, and I'm like, serious? I was like, 5-second commercial. I was like, man, it's getting less and less. But yeah, YouTube understands. It's a lot shorter. So let's talk about Gen Z real quick, because I'm just looking at the clock. We still have a lot more discussion. We're kind of getting into it as we go, but Gen Z is growing up 3 years slower than previous generations. And it's based off of this book called iGen. It's an excellent book. And in the book, the author talks about they're dating less, drinking less, driving less. So if you it's good that they're not drinking and driving, right, as previous generations. But I when we had the Pyra meeting last week, we did a survey and said, what age were you when you got your driver's license? What age were you two?
16.
Look, I had my first moving violation at 15 in Ohio. That was a full year before I could get my license at 16. So clearly, the day I turned 16, I was trying to get my license. So yeah, that's a whole nother webcast and another story, but no mug shots, but yeah.
16, yeah. There's been a 24% reduction in driver's licenses nationwide. And a lot of that, and I love to hear, some of the other folks on here. Looks like Lisa's 28. That's pretty impressive. You must not live in LA, right? You need to drive everywhere in LA. But yeah, you see a lot of Gen Zers. They just don't. They have Uber now. The parents will drive them around. It's what's the point? Well, why do we need to hang out? We could Zoom or go on any type of virtual platform and connect that way. 20 for Jennifer. So they also, like I said, have a attention span less than a goldfish. They have FOMO, which is a fear of missing out. And then what do you all think of that? We talked about this last week. FOMO.
It's exciting to have FOMO, fear of missing out. It's not like a negative thing. It's just like, oh yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
And then 9 seconds later, they forget about it. So we're not too worried, right?
Well, we want to see what everyone else is doing. Oh, someone else is going to Big Bear. Oh, well, I better get my Airbnb booked because I gotta go, right? Or you continually scroll, and it's this whole thing of comparing.
As far as work, when we're designing benefits, I have to look at the generations, because all these little new benefits that you could add that are voluntary, that are really cool, you need to include that in there. And so that's FOMO. So when you're recruiting for this generation, they like to see all these quirky value adds on the benefits compared to just the medical, dental, and vision. So that's where it applies at work for me.
Tuition reimbursement. How about this? Tuition repayment. Some companies have started doing this now where they're paying off the student loans. I don't believe it's deductible yet, but I think they're trying to get it worked on.
Yeah, but it's a recruiting tool.
It's a great one. Even if it's not that much money, it shows a lot of empathy, because we talked about student loans, or I had a couple of bullet points, but 37% of adults under 30 have a student loan debt with a median of $25,000. So even if you're chipping away at $100 a month, that would mean a lot to show that you care, right? It's a gesture.
Yeah, if you want to fuel this growing workforce, so the shrinking workforce, really, and if more and more people become entrepreneurs as a result of being displaced, and you have all these younger people, these Gen Zs coming out of college and wanting to work, they don't want to work to pay off a student loan. I think that's going to be the new benefit evolution. It's we're going to forget about all that paid vacation. How about we pay off that student loan debt, and in 5 years, you work with us and you maintain a above average performance rating, and we'll give you this much money toward paying off that loan. I think that's the new benefit. Y'all mark my words. I just created a new line of benefits. Meryl, y'all.
Oh yeah. It's there, and you just have to have the budget. But the tools that are out there are how to manage that, as far as payroll deduction and whatnot. And so, talk to a consultant or myself, and we'll give you those resources, because you don't want to add another thing to your HR plate to manage, right? So then that's why you hire these services, which they're actually pretty affordable. So it's worth looking at.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Personal finance and student loan understanding is very important. And I think there's a lot of resources out there.
I read a stat, though, for this generation, 15% of the parents are willing to help pay off these loans. for students too. So that does apply for employers and then the parents of the students too. So those programs are inclusive of that.
Yeah. And we've got about 15 minutes. Wow, I
Yep.
can't believe it. We've been
It's going quick.
good stuff.
Yeah. So the next question is, and I just quickly, how did you adapt to change when COVID hit most cities in March? And I put the picture of the toilet paper. I don't know how it was with all the people here, but it was crazy in California. Pam, we were talking about that yesterday, right? Which is, it's that Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? You're down to first level. All of a sudden, do I have toilet paper? Do I have Clorox wipes? Do I have water? Overnight, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested to see the folks who are watching, how did you all adapt? Go ahead and type your thoughts in the chat box. But yeah.
Yeah, please put your thoughts and we'll move on so we can have some solutions and ideas for you.
Exactly.
And you can keep going and we'll come back to those comments. Yeah.
Okay, so some of the impacts, the number one concern pre-COVID was for millennials and Gen Z was the climate change. After COVID, climate change was still the biggest concern for Gen Z.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but for millennials, it went from healthcare and disease prevention, right? So I thought that was kind of interesting. And my next question is, do you know anyone who COVID impacted financially? And you feel free to throw it into the chat there. Some of the statistics on that, we got some Gen Xer and Boomer stats here, so it's not all about millennials and Gen Z, at least for this slide. 4 in 10 Gen Xers delayed or considered delaying their retirement. 29% of them said that the pandemic will have a severe impact to their retirement. And compared to 19% of millennials and 15% of boomers. And 37% of boomers have delayed or considered delaying their retirement. And this is another interesting stat. 43% of Americans say they are still recovering from the Great Recession. And there's a great article on how millennials are the unluckiest generation in like the history because of the Great Recession and now this. They had a lot of great economic charts. And it says 46% of millennials are still recovering. Because if you look at the income growth, right, when they graduated, this is when they're supposed to start, going up exponentially. But there's a lot of good economic graphs out there.
I think a lot of people live back with their parents at that point.
Yeah, some of them still live with their parents, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in like cities like Los Angeles or in California, Northern California, Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And then Meryl, this is one of your slides here.
So I wanted to give a little tidbit. We've been doing some extensive research on Section 139. It's a tax-free reimbursement. Due to COVID, there are some employer benefits regarding to federal tax savings that you could implement. Now, the one that I'm particularly researching is childcare and tutoring expenses. And school is right around the corner. What do we do? It does affect working parents, both male and female, about the productivity and how are they going to tutor their child and keep track of them while they're doing it online. But there are services available for that, and the company can pay for it as well if they choose to. And this program right here, it's actually not new. It started when 9/11 happened. But it's not exactly, what's going on today, but the childcare is a big deal. So this is very extensive, a lot of research. There's a lot of fine tuning according to your company's plan and budget, but just talk to the consultant or your consultant or myself, and we'll give you some information on it. But it's something to consider because this will help your employees and the company just address all these unwritten problems that are going on. And that's just saving people money and being generous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great slide. And I know in California, a lot of schools are going online. I don't know if that's nationwide yet, but I think most people have figured it out by now, right? Majority. So that this is really helpful information.
Absolutely.
We had a company pay for all iPads for anyone with kids that don't have any, because we know, it's not affordable to everybody, and that's just one of their benefits. iPads, even having a stack of toilet paper at the office for them to take, that can all be written off on a federal level for a company. And it doesn't affect the gross income of the employee. So say if you say you just want to give $1,000 for these expenses, send us the receipt. You could do that too, and it's not counted as a gross income for the employee. So
Yeah.
it's something to bring up
Wow.
to the company if you need to do this.
And that shows tremendous empathy, Meryl, especially back in March, right? When toilet paper was like a rare commodity.
Right.
It still is, I guess, some places.
Well, it certainly has gone up in price, and I don't know about y'all noticed, but the rolls have shrunk a little bit.
No, really.
I haven't noticed that one. So get the Costco toilet paper, right? But who knows what they're doing?
Yeah.
All right, just to move it along, my next discussion question is, how did your employer respond to this one? Feel free to throw that in the chat. Some of the statistics, and I have a great slide that from Meryl. Meryl has a great slide. Millennials and Gen Z, they were equally satisfied on how their employer communicated with them during the pandemic. 62 to 60% of them said they want to stay. Their actions of the employer wanted to make them stay with the company long term. I mean, you really learn a lot about leadership and company culture when you go through something like this. Is their immediate reaction, hey, let's furlough and lay everybody off, or let's think about creative ways to keep everyone and keep in touch and give those care packages, right? Like Meryl was talking about. And then 60 to 58% of millennials and Gen Z agree that the employer is taking actions to support the mental well-being during the pandemic. So, and then I have that slide a little bit later, Meryl. And then so what's next, right? I think that's like what Meryl we were talking about, like what can you all do? Well, once we start going back into the workplace, millennials and Gen Z are going to want to work from home in the future. So I know that's a touchy subject, but you got to start getting ready for it because they may end up moving. You hear the Silicon Valley, right? A lot of those companies are just saying, hey, you can work remotely forever and move to different states. But you really want to see what they're gonna. You should be doing surveys and stuff like that. And then once COVID is over, they want to have the option to work more remotely, and only 53% of Gen Z and millennial employers have offered training and education and skills development to work remotely more efficiently. And then this is another interesting one. When asked if employers trusted their employees to be productive while working remotely, 59% of millennials said yes, 55% of Gen Z said yes. So I guess my question to the audience is, what do you think? Any baby boomers or Gen Xers out there? How do you feel?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how many minds have been changed.
So we like a lot of stats, right? But we did some real life data of people and clients within Burnham. There is a survey, and it's posted online with that link below. I'm happy to send these slides in particular so you could check it out. But the top one, the concerns of the workplace, was exposure from colleagues. And also with us dealing with clients, the last thing we want to do is, expose our clients and vendors with that. So that came on the top. The second to that was the safety for those in their household. And so that's where generations come into play. Do you have a grandparent at home? Do you have, your younger kids? And then what do they do for a living? The spouses. So those are the top two, but we'll send out this link so you could take a look at it because it's real-time data, mostly California. So this will be helpful for you to help make some decisions.
Good.
And then this is another one I wanted to add so we get some more baby boomer and Gen X stats here, right? Older employees, right, are at risk to return to the workplace. That they're listed by the CDC potentially as being a higher risk. Another study found that Gen Zs and millennials they felt like they knew less of what was going on, and Gen Z and millennials thought video calls hurts their productivity. So remember we talked about it's good to have these video calls, but are we abusing that just to seem busy? So make sure they're intentional and you have purpose with each one of these videos. Have an agenda, have action items, right? These are all important things because this is what they're saying. So and then you want to add this one too?
Yep. So info. I'm sure you're getting emails from tons of places, workers' comp, your benefits broker, but we do have a COVID response center that's really fine-tuned to what's going on. But my key here is having personalized conversations because I've heard it all. I see on the notes, being reactive and doing furloughs. My clients are from there to, paying for benefits till indefinitely while people are furloughed.
Yeah.
So you have to have these personalized conversations and really get to know your client before you offer solutions because there's so many solutions that came out of nowhere, COVID testing and whatnot, that you really need a partner that vetted it all out, knows you, knows the company, knows what your budget is, so you just don't start Googling everything. So if you want to reinvent the wheel, go to somebody that you trust so they could point you to the right direction and be there with you side by side. So personalized conversation is the key here when you're doing a return to work plan or anything related to this disaster that's going on, which I have been saying post COVID, but we're still in it. So one day.
One
right?
day.
One day. One day. And this is a video that we could send out afterwards. Just send me or Meryl or Pam an email and we'll send this to you along with the reference page to this presentation. But Instagram was ranked as the #1 social media platform to have a negative effect on young people's health and well-being due to lack of sleep, body image, FOMO, and cyberbullying. So my question to you all is, did COVID impact your social media use and how did it make you feel? I think part of it was information gathering, right? But does anybody want to type something in the chat box as we're wrapping up in the next couple of minutes? Well, I'll just give you some more brief stats. Some researchers found that the mere presence of your smartphone on your desk reduces your brain or your cognitive ability. They call it the brain drain. So there's a great article on the Harvard Business Review from that. And then another study found that laptops are less effective compared to writing with a pen and paper. So I still have my little notebook here, even though I can type it, but it's faster. But yeah, I have the notebook and everything else. Another study said that people spend an average of 47% of the time online procrastinating. Sometimes you go down that rabbit hole, right? Something pops up, an email, and then you end up losing a half an hour. And then the last one is, and this is what Pam was saying earlier, UPenn did a study and found that Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram use decrease your well-being. So being able to disconnect or just control it and don't let it control you is very important.
Yeah. I learned that I could tell Siri to, stop notifications so that I could actually focus and get some work done. But yeah, it can be distracting.
Productivity wise, it's just, and across the board, we start off the day. Don't start off by comparing yourself to your friends on Instagram or influencers. Start off your day by actually waking up and, I don't know, meditating, doing something rather than comparing yourself because it's.
Yep.
A positive note I wanted to say about social media. So Copper Cow Coffee, that's the one that we partnered with to send coffee out last week for the Pyro meeting. But that popped up for my social media. And then I contacted them. They happen to be women-owned, which we are too at Burnham, and that I did connect with them because of social media. So
social media is great. Yeah, I think it's
listening to everything that we're saying. But hey, in this terms, we're helping a local business here, and there you go.
Yeah.
I think, and also finding out kind of what's going on. Like I know a lot of cities have used social media to inform the residents of what's happening and staying alert. It's just understanding what understanding where the sources come.
Yeah.
And Pew Research came out with another interesting study today. I just saw it right before of where people get their news and information. So just make sure you understand where everything's coming from, the sources, that you're looking at. And then this is just some additional stats on mental health, right? Deloitte found that 48% of Gen Zs and 44% of millennials, so they feel anxious or stressed most of the time. And then actually, after COVID, they did a poll study in May and found that Gen Z and millennials reported lower levels of stress in April and May because of they had more flexibility to work from home. Not have I don't know if you're in LA or not. I don't know if most people probably are not, but in LA traffic, you're doing a 2 hour round trip usually, unless you live down the street. Right, Meryl? How much do you drive?
Yeah, 3 hours dropping off a kid, picking up, making dinner. Yeah, there you go. So, I have been a lot closer to my daughter since all this. You know, some parents are just overwhelmed by it, but this has been the best bonding time with my child. So I'm fortunate.
I've been barbecuing almost every day. It's been awesome.
Hey, we're on time, but I just had another cool, not a cool stat, but stress is number 2 to date on claims. So it's equivalent to a lot of money, and I could foresee it going even higher and higher as the COVID deal is going on. But they see by 2030 that stress will be the number 1 disability claim globally. So
Yeah.
we need to get in front of it. Call your EAP provider, see what resources they have. That has been increasing. It used to be 2% and then average 5% of utilization for companies. And post-COVID, it's about 9% now. So
Wow.
that's a good thing. But they want to make it at least 20%. Who
Yeah.
knows? We'll report
Well,
back next year.
And Meryl, I mean, look at these stats, right? They said in the UK report, they found a return on investment of $6.22 for every $1.24 invested in mental health.
Wow.
So I mean, all the stats are here, right? On
Yeah.
invest in your employees. They're gonna stay with you longer. Turnover is
Yeah.
expensive as well.
And you're gonna reap some benefit, and you're gonna reap the reward. I can't believe we're at the top of the hour already.
It's crazy. We had that one last slide here.
Yeah.
Pretty much on these were just some generational stats on the protests that are happening. This
Oh
was
wow.
a
Yeah.
poll
We'll
from the
have to
Pew
have
Research Center.
a conversation about this.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to. But it's from June 4th to June 10th. 73% of 18 to 29-year-olds had conversations with family or friends about race or racial equality in the past month. And then you look at 72% of 30 to 49-year-olds, and then 67% of 50 to 64-year-olds, and 62% of 65 and older. So it's kind of interesting to see who's doing what. Look at 21% of 18 to 29-year-olds contributed money to an organization. 13% of that same group contacted a public official to express their opinion, and 13% of that same group, 18 to 29, which is essentially Gen Zers / younger millennials, participated in a protest or rally.
Wow.
This is all happening. So what we're doing at Burnham is, we're fine-tuning and really doing more action on the D&I front and educating, and then also, working with Santor and Pam, like giving us your expertise because you do this quite a bit. And so education is the key, and not just like hiding from all of this because it's happening and people are bringing it to work when they're upset about something they saw on the internet. So we do need to get this addressed, but having the resources available in education is what we're focusing on.
Good. Thank you so much. It's good work.
So that's pretty much it. And just one last thing, we all crave work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
We all want to be connected with each other. We have the challenge for paying for student loans for ourselves or for our kids. We like to be recognized for quality work. We want to make an impact. We like to be autonomous and not micromanaged. So there are a lot of things we have in common. And then just everyone, we should really just listen and empathize with what Meryl was saying earlier, get some mentoring, provide opportunities for growth. Right now, there's a good time to do that. And just measure people by, at work, measure their productivity by their tasks rather than, how many hours are logged into Zoom or anything else or Microsoft Teams. So you really need to, it takes more time, but it should be task related rather than, rather than a production.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Well, thank you all. I want to say thank you so much to Meryl and to Santor for joining me today, and for all of you who've popped in and popped out, who've hung with us. Lisa and Jennifer, you get the rewards for the day. I know Lisa had to sign off, but This is an important conversation, and one that I think that we need to continue to have, because education is so incredibly important for all of us, regardless of where your seat is in the organization. So again, thank you. You all enjoy the rest of your week wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next live program.
Thanks for having us, Pam.
Welcome.
Bye, everyone.